Hey, what's going on? Luke here, and we're here to preview round 3 of the 2021 NRL season. Now, to speaking on last week, wasn't that great. Started off pretty poor. Actually, thinking back, I think even round 1 was quite similar. But I started off, I got the first couple wrong in the round and then got the rest of them right. So last week, the Warriors let me down, as did the Melbourne Storm. But I'm hoping to go a little bit better this week. Hopefully, I can get 7 from 8. Actually, you know what? I'll take any improvement. Now, just before we go ahead and go into my tips and predictions, I just want to take the time to ask if you do happen to enjoy this video, make sure you go ahead and leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you're new around here. Turn on the notification bell as well so you don't miss out on any of my videos. Now, let's get into my tips. To kick off round 3, I have a grand final rematch. It's Penrith Panthers taking on the Melbourne Storm. And obviously in the grand final, the Melbourne Storm got the goods. I think it might happen again in this game. The reason being is that Nathan Cleary has been ruled out already. Matt Burton, you would assume, will come in. Maybe Tyrone May, but I'm just assuming Matt Burton by the fact that they're keeping him around at the club and not releasing him early. So you've got to give him a go. He's coming in. For the Storm, they also have Ryan Pappenhausen out, but Nico Hines comes in. So it is going to be a good element to the game. The fact that the Clive Churchill medalist from last year, Ryan Pappenhausen, the guy who pretty much sort of broke open the game for Melbourne, and Nathan Cleary, who you could say is the best player for Penrith, are both missing. You add in the fact that Cameron Smith's not playing and a whole bunch of other players. So this grand final rematch doesn't really feel like a grand final rematch in the sense that the team lineups are so different, but I feel like the intensity is going to be there. Obviously, both of these teams have great qualities about them. Both going to be up there at the end of the season. Penrith haven't lost yet. Melbourne have. Melbourne coming off the back of a loss last week. A very disappointing loss to the Eels, so you think they'll be wanting to hit back. While Penrith, they ended up getting the job done against the Bulldogs, but they weren't exactly convincing at times. I mean, the Bulldogs pushed them for half an hour or so, pretty much the first half, and I think a lot of that was due to the fact that Api Coruscant is out for a couple of weeks now. I think it's more than a couple of weeks, actually, but his replacement wasn't that great. I don't know if it was just nerves, but Mitch Kenny made a couple of errors. I remember specifically there were 2 sets in a row where he dropped the ball, or 3 or 4 passes. He did something where there was 2 errors in a row, and I was like, oh, they're definitely missing Coruscant out here, just missing that little bit of direction, that little bit of spark out of dummy half. It just wasn't there, and I think against the Storm that will really hamper them. The Storm, though, themselves weren't that great last week. In fact, they lost, so obviously not that great. But the Eels, they were pretty good. They defended really well. Storm, I still felt like they were going to get them at times. Obviously, it didn't happen, but I think the conditions played a big part in that. I think had it been dry tracks, maybe the Storm would have got the job done, but obviously they didn't, and they'll be looking to hit back, and I think they're going to do it this round. Panthers, they've got a decent side, but without Cleary, without Coruscant, you're missing 2 very important parts of your team. I don't think they'll be able to get the job done against the Storm. And I mean, the Storm themselves, in terms of the grand final, are missing Cameron Smith and also missing Pappenhausen now, but they've still got Brandon Smith there. I think they'll be able to do a good enough job, and I think it'll be a tight one, but I think Storm will win this one 1-12. Moving on to Friday night, we have the St. George Illawarra Dragons taking on the Manly Warringah Seagulls. Now this one, I won't say it's a battle of the spoon. It's not a spoonball clash at this point in the season, but it definitely has potential to be. I think it's going to be an absolute dud of a game. You have the Dragons taking on Manly, both 2 teams who you expect to be down the bottom by the end of the season. Still no Tommy Trbojevic for Manly, still won't be there for another couple of rounds, so that means that we've got Dylan Walker at the back. We've got a very lackluster Manly side. An interesting selection in the forwards, though, as you see Josh Schuster, who I'm pretty sure is a 5'8". I haven't really heard of him too much as a second rower, but he's going to be a starting second rower, just re-signed with Manly. All the hype about him was playing 5'8". He was going to play 5'8". If Kieran Foran goes down, maybe come off the bench a little, and instead he's playing second row. I don't really understand this. It's not really going to help his development in terms of playing in the halves going forward. Kieran Foran is only a stopgap sort of player for them, you would imagine. He's quite old. I think he only signed a 1-year or 2-year deal contract, so he's not going to be there long term, whereas Schuster will be. A lot of people have tipped him for the Dally M Rookie of the Year, including me, so it's a good sign that he's in the first grade side, but it just seems like they're just chucking him in the side just to get him in first grade, not because he's actually good enough or ready to play his position, so I'm not sure about this one. Also interesting is that Josh Aloiai is on the bench still, the guy who was supposed to be the big replacement for Adam Fanua-Blake. We've seen how Fanua-Blake's gone at the Warriors, and then we see how Aloiai, who was all this big controversy in the off-season about him trying to get out of the Tigers and how good of a player he was and how he needs to go to Manly for big money, and he's on the bench. It says a lot about Manly at this point. Now, I started off this preview by saying it was going to be a dud of a game. However, the Dragons are actually being pretty good the last couple of rounds. It is surprising, I'll be honest. It is really surprising for me. I thought they'd be getting the wooden spoon for sure, but this side, they're actually kind of lifting it. It's kind of cool to see for the Dragons, considering how they've played in the last couple of years. I feel like if they had the effort there when they had the team that they had the last couple of years, if they still had Frizzell and a couple of others, I would have loved to have seen how they would have went with this sort of mentality. But to start the season, I thought Ben Hunt's been good. Corey Nolan made an impact last week. Andrew McCullough's been fantastic for him. Kind of similar to what he did for the Knights. I know he got injured last year as well at the Knights, but when he first came in, he made an immediate impact. impacts, and they looked a lot better with him playing. So it is funny considering McCullough's always been looked at least in the last couple of seasons, he's been looked at as someone who was done and couldn't offer anything to clubs, yet the last two he's been at, he's made an immediate impact. So I think that's an interesting one. He's someone who you look at and you go, yeah, the rules don't really suit him these days, the game's too fast, and yet he still produces this. I don't know, he's a quality player, McCullough. Add in you guys like Phil Miono, the Jack Bird new signing, I think he's been quite good for him. Not outstanding, but he's definitely been an upgrade on Ewan Aiken. But Phil Miono's been a good find for them in terms of starter. I know he's been around for a little while, but a lot of those guys who have been on the fringes or haven't really been playing that well, they've stepped up so far. I know it's only early on in the season, but I thought they've been quite good, and I think they'll have enough to get past Manly. I can't see Manly winning this one. I'm going to go Dragons 13 plus for this one. Moving on to the second game of Friday night, it's the South Sydney Rabbitohs taking on the Sydney Roosters. The traditional season opener for quite a while has now moved to round 3. I don't mind it though. I got a bit sick of seeing it in the first round every single year, but looking at this game, I think it's going to be a fantastic one. Obviously, both sides, they're pretty strong at this point. Roosters looking really, really good. The Rabbitohs not looking amazing, yet we know they're capable of being amazing. So I think it's more of a fact that we know the Rabbitohs can produce when needed, and they're finally playing a team who's actually like a really, really good team. I know against the Storm they did, but Storm just came out and blew them off the park within the first 15 minutes. So the game was already over by then. Last week they weren't great, but they got the job done. This week, I think they need to be a lot better if they want to beat the Roosters, because the Roosters are absolutely on fire. And especially considering the last game that they played against each other, the Rabbitohs put 60 on them. We know the Rabbitohs are capable of beating the Roosters, but I think the Roosters are going to want to hit back. I would say that it's still going to be firmly in their mind how they got embarrassed, and I think all the footage they'll be looking at throughout the week, be looking at that game, and Trent Robinson will have them raring to go. You've got a great battles between the halves, between fullbacks, hooker, every position has a great battle, particularly Latrell Mitchell up against James Tedesco, two former teammates, obviously because of Latrell's history at the Roosters, but just in the sense as well that they're both going for the top fullback in the NRL, which Tedesco has a firm grip of. But we know Latrell wants to be there as well, so he's going to be pushing for it, and he's had a great start to the season, and we know that if he plays at his best, he is capable of getting up there with Tedesco. At the moment, Tedesco, he's on a whole nother level. The whole Rooster side seems to be on a whole nother level to the whole comp at this point. So for this one, it's not an easy one, but I think I am going to be tipping the Roosters. I think it is going to be a close one. I think it's going to be 1-12. I definitely don't think the Rabbitohs is going to be a pushover, but with the whole contract situation with Adam Reynolds sort of lingering around, I don't see it being a good game for the Rabbitohs. I can't see them lifting as much as they'll need to against the Roosters. I think they'll be in the game for sure. And I think a lot of the times when Benji Marshall comes on, I think it really sparks him and gets him back into the game. But I think the Roosters, they'll just have too much firepower for him. So yeah, Roosters 1-12. Now moving on to Super Saturday. The first game, we have the Canberra Raiders taking on the New Zealand Warriors. Now the Warriors have had a pretty strong start to the season. Obviously didn't get the job done last week against the Knights, but they still didn't look that bad, especially considering where I thought they'd be at this point in the season. I thought they wouldn't be gelling that well. They had a lot of new buys, and they've really hit the ground running in terms of the actual play that they've produced, not necessarily the results, but how they've played. I think they look a lot better than what I thought they would be. However, I think that all changes this week. Chanel Harris-Tavita is out. I think he's a key part into their side. I mean, any halfback is going to be a key part to the side, but obviously him being out, he's a huge loss, and although he's not someone who has a host of experience, I think he is someone who fits the Warriors perfectly. Sean O'Sullivan comes in. He's a guy who's sort of been thrown around club to club and hasn't really made a mark at any of them, so I don't really know what to think for Sean O'Sullivan. I don't know if he's going to be decent. I don't know if he's going to be shit. I really don't know too much about him because he comes in and he plays a couple of games for each club and either gets injured or gets dropped, so I don't know if it's a good sign. I don't know if it's a bad sign, but he's definitely a downgrade on Harris-Tavita in my opinion, and I think they're going to suffer from that big time. The Raiders, they're just too good. They're too good to sort of be coming up against a side that is still trying to find itself in the NRL and still trying to find halves and all that sort of stuff. I know they're not trying to find halves, but obviously the injuries happen, but just having a new guy come in against the Raiders, you don't want them. They're a top 4 side. The Raiders are absolutely outstanding. Although I don't think they've actually shown anywhere near the best of their ability in 2021 so far. I think Hodgson's still finding his feet. I think a lot of the team's still finding their feet. But is this the game that they're going to turn it on? Possibly. But at the same time, I will say, this is a game that I feel like the Warriors could get the job done. They could get a sneaky little victory here. To be honest, I thought the Raiders were actually quite lucky. They were quite fortunate to get the job done against the Sharks. And there was a little bit of some dodgy goal kicking from Townsend that actually did get them the win. Otherwise, the Sharks would have won it. It was a very back and forth contest. contest. So I can see the Warriors pushing it with them. Obviously, I don't think the Warriors are as good as a side as the Sharks in terms of grinding out a victory, but I think they will be in the contest, and I think the Raiders will have to play pretty decent if they want to win this one. But I do think they actually will win it. I think they'll play decent, and I think they get the job done 1-12. Actually, just before I move on to the next game, I just want to touch on Jared Croker returning for the Raiders. He's a big in for them. I thought Sebastian Kris has been quite good for them. However, Jared Croker, he's their captain, he's their leader, he's their goal kicker. He adds a lot to this side, so I think he's going to be a huge inclusion. Now, into the second game of Super Saturday, it's the Brisbane Broncos taking on my Canterbury-Bankstown Bulldogs. Now, straight up, there's going to be some bias here. I'm going to say I think the Bulldogs are going to win this one. However, I was talking about earlier saying that the Dragons Manly game is quite shit and could be a possible spoon bowl battle. This is definitely going to be a spoon bowl battle. Both of these sides have shown absolutely nothing in 2021. The Bulldogs very, very disappointing. The Broncos just as disappointing. Not so much in terms of they looked total shit, but in round 1 they showed a lot of promise. Round 2 not so much. Now I think a big plus for the Bulldogs going into this game is the fact that both of the games they played in the first 2 rounds, they started off quite strong. They played pretty decent. They had a lead against the Knights. They nearly had the lead against Penrith, who you could argue are the favourites to win the whole premiership this year. They're on a 17-game win streak throughout the regular season. Bulldogs showed some good signs, however they just can't go on with it and they fall off once things stop going their way. And speaking of going their way, penalty count's definitely not going their way. However, I can see it happening this week. I don't think it was going to happen against Penrith, but I can see it happening this game. And that could be a risky thing to say considering it's being played at Suncorp. Usually the home team gets the rubber green, but I think just the last couple of weeks, there's been too many times that Bulldogs haven't got penalties, so I think it's finally going to come full circle, and I think the Bulldogs are going to get some. But in terms of the Dogs, I think the fact that they played in atrocious conditions the first couple of weeks as well is going to help them this week, because I don't think we've actually truly been able to see what they're able to do with the ball because of how bad the conditions have been. Both games have been in torrential rain. The Knights one happened, I think, just as they were about to kick off. Maybe that was Penrith. I think it was Penrith, actually. Right as they were about to kick off, it just started pouring, and obviously it's been pouring all week in Sydney, so I don't think they've been able to train much, but I'm expecting good things from the Bulldogs this week. I'm expecting them to get the job done. The Broncos are a dangerous side in the sense that they could be one of those flat track bully sort of sides, in the sense that the Bulldogs aren't very good. The Broncos know they're a little bit better than them, and then Milford and all those guys just go absolutely crazy and play a 10 out of 10 performance. I don't know if that's going to happen, but they definitely have the potential to do it. We know Milford, he's at least played half decent this year. We saw him play pretty well against the Eels. I feel like if he fires, Broncos are going to win, but look, he has to fire, and we know he's very hot and cold, but he has been pretty good at the start of the season, so we'll see how that one goes. But in terms of picking a winner, I'm going to stick solid with my Bulldogs. I'm going to pick them 13+. Now into the last game of Super Saturday, we had the Parramatta Eels taking on the Cronulla-Sutherland Sharks. This one for me has the potential to be one of the better games of the round. Obviously, you got your Roosters, you got your Rabbitohs taking on each other. They're obviously a big clash in name, but this one I feel like in quality could be a really good one. The Sharks have impressed me to start the season, not in the sense that they've been getting wins, but just in terms of watching them. You look at them, I think Mandy Moyle looks pretty good. We see Connor Tracy going into the centre this game. I thought he actually looked quite decent. He's got a bit of pace on him, but he's not a centre, so that's a potential sort of place for the Eels to go, especially with their back line. You got your Ferguson, you got your Sevos. I'm not sure what side he's actually on, but whatever side, you just got to go at him. You got to keep going at him all night. Townsend didn't have the best of games last week, but you think he will be looking to strike back, and obviously struck goals better. But the Eels, they were really good last week, beating the Storm. You're going to have heaps of confidence going into this game. It's out at Bankwest too, so we know that the Eels are a completely different side when they play at Bankwest. So they got the job done last week. I think they'll get the job done this week, and I think you guys like Mitchell Moses, Dylan Brown, Gutherson, really, I should just say Gutherson. Gutherson's really been leading this side. Reid Marnie as well. Gutherson and Marnie been carrying big time. One thing to note as well is that Ryan Madison is out. Isaiah Papali comes into the side. I think he's been going really, really well. I should say Papali. I think that's how you say it actually. But yeah, he's been really good off the bench. Finally gets a start for them. He's been a real good find for the Eels, and he deserves his start. So I think the Eels, they're going to have a really good game for this one. I think they're going to be up after playing the Storm. I know a lot of the times teams after they play the Storm tend to come out and play like shit the next week because they put so much into that game. However, I think the Eels, they'll have enough to get the job done against the Sharks, and I'm going to go 13+ for this one. Now we move on to Sunday afternoon football. We have the Newcastle Knights taking on the West Tigers. Now I feel like I've said a lot of 13+ throughout my tips, and to be honest, looking at this game, I can't see how this isn't a 13+. I think the Knights will absolutely destroy the Tigers. They've been destroyed the first 2 rounds, and a lot of times the teams who have been destroyed in the first couple of rounds, they start to put up a fight, or at least a better fight in the coming rounds, but I just don't see it happening. The Knights have been super strong to start off the season. Wins against the Bulldogs and the Warriors, obviously not the biggest scouts, but some pretty decent scouts. The Warriors came off a win in round 1, and they obviously put the sword to them in round 2. The forward pack is just outstanding for the Knights. It's probably a pretty underrated forward pack. And I've seen a couple of people now sort of pick at the Knights to push for a top 4 spot, and I'm with them. They haven't even got their best side or anywhere near their best side on the park, and they're still producing some pretty good performances, led by their forward pack. And I think they've got maybe the best forward pack in the whole comp when you actually look at who they've got in terms of rep plays and internationals and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, this Tiger side, I've looked through it, and it looks like a reserve grade side sprinkled with a couple of first grade players in it. It'd be like if, I don't know, it kind of reminds me of those reserve grade sides where there's a guy coming back from injury and all of a sudden you've got a James Tamu playing in there and you're like, why are they even playing here? But they're actually playing first grade. So yeah, I think that's scary signs for the Tigers. I had them sort of pushing for a top 8 spot before the season started, but just looking at their side and how they've actually performed in the first couple of rounds, absolutely abysmal. I'm going the Knights 13+, but in saying that, after I've just absolutely savaged the Tigers, I can see them coming out and getting an upset victory. They're just one of those sides of the Tigers. They're so hard to read, but yeah, their side on paper does not look good. Meanwhile, the Knights 4-pack looks absolutely outstanding. So 13+ Knights. Now moving on to the final game of the round. It's a Queensland clash. It's the North Queensland Cowboys taking on the Gold Coast Titans. Now the Cowboys have been absolutely abysmal in the first couple of rounds. I just talked about the Tigers looking bad. The Cowboys probably look even worse, to be honest. Now I was about to sit here and say that the Cowboys have a really good 4-pack, and in fact I just started talking about it, but then I had a proper look at their 4-pack. That Tamalalo, they look like they absolutely have nothing. They legit have absolutely nothing. Jordan McLean's a shadow of himself. Cohen Hess is definitely a shadow of himself. They've got Josh Maguire coming off the bench. This 4-pack looks atrocious. Like, it looks so bad. It looks absolutely terrible, especially when you compare it to the Titans side. You got Big Tino, you got Fafita, you got Proctor, you got all these big guns coming in for the Titans, and then you look at this Cowboys pack and you're like, I don't know how the Cowboys are expected to compete with this Titans side. I know the Titans haven't looked absolutely fantastic in the first couple of rounds, but I think this might be the game where they put it all together and they put an absolute hiding on the Cowboys. I can see them putting 13+ on them easy. The Cowboys side it doesn't look good to me. Look, there's only so much Michael Morgan and Jake Clifford and Valentine Holmes and all those sort of guys can do with this side, because they just don't have any firepower anywhere, especially with that Tamalalo. I was kind of banking on Tamalalo being able to carry the Cowboys to at least a couple wins this season and sort of bring up the rest of the players with him. But without him there, and even when he was playing, he was only playing limited minutes, I just can't see them doing anything. I'm expecting them to be competing for the wooden spoon now, which is quite disappointing considering I had them pushing for the 8 yet again, and obviously yet again not going to happen. So yeah, the Titans, I've been talking about the Cowboys for the whole video here, so I better talk about the Titans. Obviously a fantastic side, great 4-pack, great backs. Finally got a win last week. I say finally after one round, but they got the job done last week. They looked quite good against the Broncos. Obviously it is the Broncos, so take it with a grain of salt. However, they did look really good, and obviously taking on the Cowboys, another Queensland clash. I'm looking forward to this one, and I think the Titans will put a pounding on them. I think it's going to be Titans 13+. Anyways, those are my tips for round 3. Leave in the comment section below, what are your tips for round 3? Is there anyone that I'm missing? Have I made a complete mistake? Because I've been making mistakes for the last couple of weeks. I need a perfect round. People have been getting perfect rounds, so any advice is definitely appreciated. So chuck it in the comment section below. Also, while you're at it, make sure you go ahead and leave a like on the video and subscribe to the channel if you're new around here. Turn on notification bells as well. It's super important in terms of actually seeing the videos. Sub boxes are super dodgy, so don't rely on them. Use the notification bell and be notified immediately and be able to see my videos straight away. Also, while you're at it, give me a follow on social media. It's on the screen right now. It's Mr. Luke and YT. My Facebook is just Mr. Luke, so go ahead and give me a follow, give me a like, do all that sort of stuff. Snapchat is Mr. Luke and YT as well, so give me a like and follow and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, that's my round 3 preview done. Hopefully you enjoyed it, and stay tuned for more content on the channel. I'll see you next time. See yous.